What's going on, y'all? It's your boy Cool Colas here, and you are now tuning into a new video on my channel. But before we get on to the topic for today, I'd love it if you did a few things. Hit the like button, subscribe button, share button, and bell icon so you get notifications for whenever I come out with new content on this channel. And then when you are finished watching this video, leave me a comment below. That way I can get back to whatever it is that you had to say about today's topic. So for today's topic, I was given a video request, and I was requested to talk about shows and movies that do not have tropes whatsoever, and my thoughts on that, and is that possible? So let's get into it. Shout out to my main man, Torian Rain Reloaded. This brother actually is the individual who sent me this request. He wanted me to speak once again about shows and movies that don't have tropes. And is that possible, of course, too? So the simple answer to this question is that it's absolutely not possible to have a show that does not have tropes whatsoever. But in order for me to go into depth about that subject, I'm going to need to kind of review something with you all as my audience that I've already talked about in my book if you've purchased it, but I need to kind of review so we're all on the same page about this. For those of you all who are unaware, a trope is a common or repetitive theme with a specific set of descriptions attached to either a character alone, a combination of characters, and a plot within the story, and it is typically recognizable by an audience. The term trope will be used generally to describe the intersection of a template or a specific gimmick attached to a character or multiple characters and a specific way that the story is being told. So that's the basic definition of a trope. A lot of times when you all hear me talk about tropes on this channel or in other spaces, it seems as though I'm describing them in a negative manner, but I need to reiterate that just because you see a trope does not mean that it is negative. A trope is actually a very neutral thing on its face, but it becomes negative depending on two things. One, the individual who is telling the story and creating the trope, and number two, the perspective of the individual who is viewing it. So for example, if you are a suspected white supremacist and you are telling a story with anti-black tropes to a black person, and maybe even to other people as well too who are justice oriented, this will be seen as a negative thing. But of course, there are other tropes that exist as well that are positive, or tropes that can be made. Remember, tropes aren't just these things that are set in stone and you can never add to it. There are tropes that you can actually add and create if it's not something that you see as a pattern or something that you tend to see all the time when you watch TV shows and when you watch movies. So I just wanted to make sure that we got that straight before we got into anything else. The reason why I say that no movies or television shows are tropeless is because it is absolutely impossible to create a story without having some type of pattern that's recognizable to an audience. And I will even go as far to say is that having tropes is actually a crucial thing that is needed when you're telling a story, because you want to add an element of relatability to your story so that an audience can gravitate to it and they can continue to watch it. You want to create something that is seen as a pattern. So in other words, it's possible that you are going to see a trope in pretty much anything that you watch. But there's another thing that we need to understand that is part of the problem here with searching for things that don't have tropes. You need to kind of rewire the way your mind thinks about movies and television shows. What I mean by that is stop trying to look for the perfect show, the perfect movie, the perfect cinematic whatever that is going to help you to feel comfortable that media is either one, changing, or two, is something that has bad things but has good things. So in other words, it balances itself out. We need to understand that we are in a system of white supremacy, and it means that it dominates every single area of activity, and entertainment is one of the most vastly dominated areas by white supremacy. So with that being said, we need to understand that there is a lot of work to do, and we do not have time to try to create complacency because we found one show or two shows or whatever that may not have tropes at all, or may have tropes that you don't see as negative. Let's just focus on television shows for a second. Another way that we need to rewire our minds is we need to find a way to stop thinking about things in such a large scale way. In other words, what I mean by that is we need to realize that we're never going to find an entire show that is going to be tropeless. You may find maybe an episode that doesn't have some type of trope, or even a season if you're lucky, but an entire show that is going to go tropeless for all of its seasons and all of its runtime, not a chance. You have to start thinking about things and dissecting them very carefully. When we're thinking about tropes, once again, we have to consider that when people are telling stories, that those who are in charge are going to tell stories the way that they want their audience to see it and the way that they want their audience to view it. One of the reasons why, for me, it's important for me to talk about what's going on in entertainment media, in blurred media, is because I want my audience to be aware of what is happening right now. So when it's time for me to take my comic ideas and my book ideas and everything else like that I'm creating to the next level, you can see the way that I will portray my positive tropes that will be empowering to Black society, and how that contrasts with what we see right now in the media that we are currently watching. But just for the sake of humoring my man, Torian Rain, because he did ask this question, I don't want to talk in circles and I want to give him a solid answer. One show that I do want to talk about that is probably as close as it would get to either having a tropeless show or having not that many negative or anti-Black tropes in it. The only show that I can think of right now would be BMF, and specifically I'm talking about the first season. I don't remember there being any blatant negative anti-Black tropes in this show in this specific season. Now, I can't really speak for the second season, and I certainly am not talking about the third season. But in the first season, for sure, of this show, I don't remember there being any anti-Black tropes or negative tropes or anything like that. And what I mean by that is, because I know some of y'all will hear me say this and you'll probably nitpick and you'll say, well, it's really about the trauma sex, really about the trauma porn, you know, it was a hood flick. I get it. I've talked about how, you know, you have trauma sauce, and how one of those is where you have these kind of like proximity, hood proximity type of shows and movies and stuff like that, and they're misportraying what's happening. They're being deceitful about who the real villain is. I realize that is a thing. But what I'm talking about are these very blatant anti-Black tropes. You know, there's, to a certain extent, there's levels to tropes, right? You have tropes that are kind of like low level, like they mean something, they have like a psychological meaning that is maybe like low base, and then there's things that are very blatant, and there's things that are very in your face, right? The typical tropes that we see that are blatant are like, you know, having a magical Negro, having tokenism, having a swirling agenda, and that type of thing, right? I could keep going, but my point is that there are certain things where, you know, hey, this is some phony diversity ploy bullshit. You know it when you see it, right? I didn't really get that, at least in the first season of BMF. The other seasons, once again, I can't speak for it, especially that weak ass third season, but like in the first season, for sure, I cannot think of any real, you know, negative tropes, or if I can, they're kind of minimal, you know, compared to a lot of the other shows that I have seen. You know, because I know there's some that you all might be able to point out even from like looking at that show, but for the sakes of the conversation, I would say that's probably about as close as you will get. And again, I want to make it clear to y'all, when I talk about tropes, I typically talk about anti-Black tropes. Now, there may be times I may cover tropes in general just for the sakes of somebody either asking me for a video request, or maybe there's a topic I want to discuss with you all, or whatever the case may be. But generally, my whole point of doing this channel is to talk about anti-black tropes that exist in media, because the reality is that we really need to be aware of the things that we are watching and the things that we are also exposing to our children and individuals who are impressionable. So it's very important for us to just take a deep dive at the ways that these things pop up psychologically, because once again, I've said it before and I said it again, media, television shows, movies, whatever you are watching is not just art. All it is art impacting reality. Then reality also being reflected in art simultaneously, so it confuses the viewers who look at it. It's as simple as that. All right, y'all. Hope you all enjoyed this video. I hope you all enjoyed what I had to say, and I'll definitely have more to come, so make sure that you stay tuned. Other than that, I'll talk to y'all later. Peace.